Welcome back for another historic video. Today we'll be taking a look at this Jund Reanimator best of 3 deck. The deck is looking to use Life Death to reanimate one of our big creatures, or Emperor of Bones to do the same with its adaptability, and then just either smash our opponent in the face until they're dead, or use our Ulamog the Defiler to annihilate all of our opponent's permanents and lands, winning the game from there. So the creatures that we have as reanimation targets are for Atraxa Grand Unifier, which when it comes into play will allow us to reveal cards from the top of our library and then put one card of each type into our hand. This is a great card to refuel for a second wave, either finding more reanimation effects or getting more creatures into our graveyard. Then we have Arden the Usurper. This card at the beginning of combat will exile a creature card from any graveyard, and then we can put a token into play that's a copy of that card, except for it's a 5/5 black demon. Additionally, Arden will give demons menace, lifelink, and haste, so that token will be able to attack immediately. With Arden, if we take our Atraxa or our Ulamog, it will trigger the enter the battlefield ability, and then we'll also get the attack trigger for Ulamog. So this is a great way to annihilate all of our opponent's permanents. And then if we take our Grizzlebrand, we can also draw 7 cards with it to again refuel for a second wave. When it comes to getting creatures into our graveyard, we have 4 copies of Faithless Looting, which will allow us to draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. This can also help fix our hand if we're missing a reanimation card or are a bit light on lands. Fear of missing out is one of our primary ways of putting pressure on our opponent when we don't have one of our reanimate targets in play. When it enters, it allows us to loot, which we can draw and discard one of our reanimation targets. And then if we have Delirium, this creature also essentially gets a second combat step. And then we have our 4 copies of Malevolent Rumble, which acts as ramp and also fills our graveyard. For interaction, we have 2 copies of Fatal Push, 4 copies of Thoughtseize, and 2 copies of Bitter Triumph, which can also be used to discard a creature card. Then the sideboard is pretty much aimed at removing our opponent's graveyard hate. And then it does have a few other niche cards in there that can be used for certain decks. Fire Magic is a generic board wipe that we can use against strategies that are trying to go wide, such as Elves or Energy, where they might be generating a lot of weak tokens. We have 2 copies of Nature's Claim, which we will use to remove primarily any of the graveyard hate that our opponent brings into the game. 2 copies of Vexing Bauble, which can shut down free cells from our opponent. Primarily, this is for omniscience strategies where our opponent is trying to cheat omniscience into play and then cast their cards without paying their mana value. 2 copies of Abrupt Decay, which can be useful against a control deck and also against a lot of the graveyard hate that is in the historic format. 3 copies of Dampening Sphere for the Eldrazi deck. 2 copies of Defense Grid for any control strategies so that we can try and cripple them on their counter spells. And then 2 copies of Meltdown for any affinity decks that we come up against. Before we jump into the gameplay, I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe the video. It really helps the channel. And without further ado, let's jump into the games. Unfortunately, I forgot to hit record on the first match. We were up against a similar deck as ours that was trying to use the graveyard to reanimate creatures such as Arden, but they also had a heist element to their deck, which luckily for them, our deck and their deck were fairly compatible. However, we were able to take the victories in both game 1 and game 2 using a reanimation effect to bring back a large creature, which our opponent did not have answers to. After the first match, our sideboarding strategy was to remove some of our Thoughtseize, and we brought in a couple interactive spells to try and remove any graveyard hate that our opponent would have brought in. But we did use a light hand, since after game one, we didn't really know exactly what they were trying to do, as we had mainly seen the heist cards from them and not the graveyard direction. We'll make sure to hit record for the second match. I restarted the client after match one. Hopefully that fixes the display glitch we saw during sideboarding. Here we have a turn one looting. And if we find black land, then we can reanimate Ulamog. We'll give it a try. It has a lot of upside. The second looting means we can continue to dig as well if we don't find our black land with the first one. We'll fetch out the mountain. I think Atraxa will be a better reanimation target than Ulamog, but we'll put them both in the graveyard and make our decision on turn two. At the moment, we did not find our black land, and we also don't have a land drop for turn two. So Blacksmith's Talent from our opponent, and there is our black land. We'll drop that into play and reanimate Atraxa. Here we will take the Fear of Missing Out as an enchantment, Arden as our creature, the Blood Crypt as our land, then a Thoughtseize and a Bitter Triumph. We'll be able to discard some of these to clean up, so we'll get rid of the Arden and the other Ulamog. No play from our opponent. We'll Thoughtseize them, take a look at their hand. This will help us with sideboarding. So here they have a bunch of unblockable creatures in hand. We'll play out the land that they know about. And a Fear of Missing Out. Discarding our Faithless Looting. And then we'll hit for 7. Our opponent concedes. So our opponent is on some type of equipment deck or aura deck. Fatal Push would be good. I think we can shave a couple of the Thoughtseize for Nature's Claim. And we might actually even bring in the Abrupt Decay as well. And then we will leave the Meltdown and Fire Magic in the board for now and evaluate if there's a game 3, whether or not we feel they're needed. But I feel good with where the deck is right now. Let's jump back into it. This hand is good. We have Rumble to look to put some creatures in our graveyard. So we'll start with a tapped Overgrown Tomb. Two unblockable creatures. Here we'll use our Rumble and we'll pick up the land. Unfortunately, we did not mill over a creature that we would want to bring back with Life Death or Emperor of Bones. Our opponent will hit us for 2. Faithless Looting is great. We'll use this to dump an Atraxa into the graveyard. And I think we'll put in the Arden as well. Then we'll attempt to bring it back with Death. We'll take the Atraxa. That just works. So we'll take Atraxa, Abrupt Decay as our instant. This time we have a Shifting Woodlands already. We'll take the red and black Blood Crypt. And then another Life Death. No attack. And at the end of turn, we can dump out one of the Atraxas and the Grizzlebrand. Our opponent is in a lot of trouble here. They can hit for 2 more. And then if they don't have a way to remove Atraxa, we're going to gain a bunch of this life back. So first we will drop out our Emperor. We'll shock in our Blood Crypt. And then we can also throw Grizzlebrand into play here. We'll attack with Atraxa and Grizzlebrand, gain 14 life. And then I feel we can pay 7. Thing for Ulamog, really. And then here we will go to our end step. We'll dump out the Ulamog, Fear of Missing Out, or Redundant Lands. Maybe another Atraxa. I don't think it matters which ones we select here. This one is most likely in the bag already. And our opponent agrees. This is another 1-land hand where if we are able to find a black land is actually pretty good. We are on the play this time, so we will not have the extra draw step to dig for it. With double looting in hand, though, I will keep it. If we only had a single looting, I would probably take a mulligan. Grab our mountain and dig for our black land. We did not find it yet. We will discard Grizzlebrand and the other looting since we drew into some Fear of Missing Out to continue our dig. Our opponent appears to be on a burn deck. Here we will play our Fear of Missing Out. And I think we get rid of the Bitter Triumph. It's close. Emperor of Bones, our opponent will likely be able to remove before it can adapt. No play from our opponent here. Let's try and hit with Fear of Missing Out. We do have Delirium, so we get to attack twice. And then I will play out a second Fear here, discarding the Atraxa. Now we have an Emperor of Bones. A second black land would allow us to try and adapt next turn. I don't think we have another fetchable left, and we don't. Unfortunate. So here we will attack in with our first Fear of Missing Out. We'll untap itself. Then we'll hit with our second and untap itself. And we'll attack for the third time, so we have lethal on board here. I think we will dig for the land, which we do find now. And then no need to play out the Emperor. Didn't notice beforehand, but our opponent does appear to be on some sort of jank deck with a lot of cards in their deck. These decks typically aren't very good, although in Arena they do tend to draw into useful cards in the matchup due to how the shuffler works. They'll accelerate here with a Lotus Field. And then I believe we should have lethal here with the double combat step. So we will shock in our Tomb. Then we'll play out our Emperor of Bones, which we can use to grab Atraxa. Then using Hold Priority, we will adapt before combat. Here we'll take an Arden, Fatal Push, Land, and Life Death. And then we will swing in with everyone. Fear of Missing Out will untap itself. The other one will untap the other Fear of Missing Out. And this will be lethal. With these giant decks as well, our opponents don't typically do any type of sideboarding, so we're not going to play around any graveyard hate in game 2. Even if they did have some to bring in, it's unlikely that they would be able to find it in their opening hand. We will substitute out our Fatal Push though, and we will bring in the Abrupt Decay. Both of them are removal spells, and Abrupt Decay does have a little bit more utility of what it can target. And then we will jump into the second game. This hand has no reanimation and no way to get a creature into our graveyard. We will mulligan. This is much better. We will play a turn 1 Faithless Looting and hopefully a turn 2 Death to bring back Ulamog. And our opponent just concedes. Match 4, we have won the die roll. We'll play first. This is a great hand. We'll open up on Thoughtseize, try and disrupt what our opponent's doing and see what they're playing. They are on a burn deck and they currently just have an empty, which if they want to tap out on turn 2 for, that is fine. Here we want to fetch up our forest so that on turn 3 we can play our Shifting Woodland untapped. And then we'll use Fear of Missing Out to discard the Ulamog. It's a close call between Ulamog and Atraxa. I think actually we will go for the Atraxa in this matchup. The life gain can be important. Our opponent can shock our face or hold up shock. They choose to hold it, and then they play an empty. We will use our looting and discard our Ulamog and our Arden. And then we will hold back Fear of Missing Out as a blocker. Next turn we can use Death on Atraxa, which will be very difficult for our opponent to attack past. They decide to use a Lightning Helix instead of the Monstrous Rage. And they discard one of their land cards. Presumably they have another land in hand already. And they do. So here we will use Death. Notably, our opponent does have the opportunity to burn us out. We'll take another Atraxa, a Bitter Triumph. Faithless Looting. And probably Shifting Woodland because it is an untapped land that doesn't hurt us, although we would like to have more colors here. And we'll play out the Woodland. Our opponent needs to come up with 3 more damage of burn. We do end up gaining 7 life off of that, so we are still alive. If they use the Monstrous Rage, we could consider using Bitter Triumph to destroy Inti next turn. They hold up the shock as if they know what's in our hand. That's fine. We will use our rumble. And here we'll definitely take the black land. We'll play it tapped, and then we can use Bitter Triumph at instant speed. We do want to use it prior to the combat step. That way Inti doesn't trigger its ability. Our opponent decides to go face with their shock. Are they going to fire up one of their lands? They do. Here we will discard a card to take out Inti. Doesn't matter which one we discard. Next turn we can cast and adapt the Emperor of Bones, and this will wipe out all of our opponent's lands and the creature token that's going to be left over here as well. So we'll save ourselves 3 lives. Then we'll play out the Emperor of Bones. Here we will take our Arden. Actually, Ulamog I think needs to be the pick. If we take Arden, it won't trigger since the beginning of the combat step will have already activated. Ulamog sees itself in exile, so it comes in with 10 counters. And our opponent goes down to 6 life. So they need to find a land and then additional burn, which they probably won't be able to do. So there is game number 1. In this matchup, we're going to shave the Thoughtseize since we don't want to deal additional damage to ourselves. And then we can bring in the Abrupt Decay and the Nature's Claim. And we will run it back from here. This is a good hand. Turn 2, Atraxa or Arden. We'll shock ourselves and discard one of each. Just need to dodge Graveyard Hate on turn 2. They will blow up our Blood Crypt, that's fine. We have some basics left in the deck. We'll grab our Mountain. And here we will use Death to reanimate Atraxa. Here we will grab our Emperor of Bones, Abrupt Decay as our instant, and an Overgrown Tomb as our land. And then we will discard another Atraxa. I believe we did see Path to Exile in the first game, so our opponent could still have answers to this Atraxa in their hand. And they do have it. We'll tutor up our last basic. We'll take 2. Our opponent uses a Monstrous Rage. They could still have removal for Emperor of Bones, but I think we need to go for it anyway. Here we will grab the Atraxa again. Take the Ulamog, Fear of Missing Out as our enchantment, a Fatal Push, Faithless Looting, and a Stomping Ground. hit for 7. Then here we will discard one of the Fear of Missing Outs, the Ulamog, a land, and the Faithless Looting. Keeping a couple lands in hand just in case our opponent has another White Orchid Phantom or a way to flicker this one. They are looking at our basics. And they Stone Rain the mountain. That's fine. Here we will play out our Stomping Ground, ouch, and our Fear of Missing Out. We will discard the Arden. And we draw a Dead Prismatic Vista. We don't have any way of putting counters on our Emperor after it's already in play, so no need to take one of our creatures here. And we'll pass back to our opponent. We do have Delirium for Fear of Missing Out, so we'll get 2 combat steps next turn. We'll Fatal Push the White Orchid Phantom. If we let that through and they have some burn cards in their hand, they could very easily burn us out, so we do have to use our Fatal Push there. And they have another one. They'll likely go for a Stomping Ground. We don't have a land to search up, but we do have lethal on board if they're not able to remove our creatures. And with a red mana, they probably can't. We'll attack in with both. Fear of Missing Out will untap the Emperor. And then we'll attack for lethal. They shock our face, doesn't matter. Good game. And I believe we are now 4-0, 8-0 going into the final trophy round. We have won the die roll. We will play first. This hand does not have a way to get a creature into the graveyard. We have good mana. Still going to take a mulligan. 1 land and no way to discard a creature. Not like this, guys. Brutal. So we're going to go down to 4 cards in hand. And I think we have to keep this one. We'll get rid of both Ardens and the Fear of Missing Out. Then we will shock ourselves and play Faithless Looting. And I think we need to keep the Emperor. Any type of discard or removal from our opponent pretty much collapses our hand here. We'll fetch out a Forest. Play out our Emperor. And then no need to get the Atraxa yet. We can grab it next turn in case our opponent does have removal. Didn't seem like they had a response to that trigger. Fingers crossed. That worked. Surprising. Here we will grab another Atraxa, Fatal Push, and land, and probably Life Death. And our opponent sees what we have to pick from and concedes. Not knowing the matchup, I do think we will shave a couple Fatal Push and bring in the Abrupt Decay. And then from here, we will run it back and readjust if there's a game 3. This hand has some discard, no reanimation effect. Let's give it a try. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Well, we'll give this one a try. So we'll get rid of the Atraxa here and try to get an Arden Ulamog win. Don't mind having a removal spell. We will discard the Atraxa and Arden. Without knowing what our reanimation spell will be, Atraxa is a better target in the graveyard than trying to go for the combo kill. Here we see our opponent is a standstill deck, and they have Karn the Great Creator. There is our Emperor of Bones, which we can use to grab our Arden this turn. Next turn, we can either grab the Atraxa or the Arden, depending on which one we feel is appropriate. And our opponent concedes. Good game. So there you have it. We went 5-0, 10-0 in this best of 3 league. We did play up against a handful of non-meta jank decks and didn't really encounter much graveyard hate in the post-board games, but overall the deck was pretty dominant, and we do have good interaction against graveyard hate in general in the sideboard that we are able to bring in if needed. Many of the decks we came across this league didn't put on a ton of pressure in their game 1, and then it seemed like their sideboard plans might have been a little weak against the reanimation style that we were running. The Boros land deck probably gave us the best run for our money, as we are only running the 3 basic lands in our deck, and we're using the Prismatic Vista to tutor them up. So there was the potential that we ran out of lands and could no longer play our cards in that match, but we were able to pull out 2 victories there. Then a few of the other decks were off meta and didn't really present a coherent strategy, which we were very easily able to overrun with our powerful reanimation targets. I do want to play another league with this one and get a better feel for how it performs against some of the more powerful strategies that we can come up against, such as, an Eldrazi deck or something of the like. But overall, it was a very successful league. The deck did great. It performed as it was designed to, and we got 5 match wins. So thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content.